This revolution is not going away.
This is the Ron Paul Liberty Report with Ron Paul, Daniel McAdams, and Chris Rossini.
We are all ambassadors of the Ron Paul doctrine, and it's so simple. Just tell the truth.
An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, good to see you on the program.
It's great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Very good, Chris, and I understand we have a very interesting subject to talk about today. Why don't you open up the doors here to the subject that we may be talking to and maybe give us an update on what gold is doing?
Yeah, as our regular viewers know, we have a friendship with Birch Gold Group. So it's for people that don't know anything about gold, or they do and they don't know where to turn. So and now is a good time because gold, obviously, it's reflected in the gold price, and one of the reasons why you should consider. Is governments are always trying to control the uncontrollable, whether it be people, weather, wars. Look at President Trump, how he lost control of something that he thought he could control. And now we're 90 days in, and we said at the beginning he's not going to admit that he was wrong and was defeated. And now we're 90 days in, and he still has not admitted. And so the same principle applies to the value of money. They think that they can control it. So they print, and then the next guy prints, and then Trump comes in and prints some more. And then the next thing you know, you have skyrocketing inflation. And then you can end up with hyperinflation. And you may think to yourself, they would never let that happen. It's what has always happened with when they start printing money. There is yet one nation that put the brakes on. We were hoping President Trump would put the brakes on. You got to cut. You can't do this. No. He's going along with the rest of them even faster. So gold is a way to protect yourself from government, destroying our money. They're doing it illegally. They're doing it unconstitutionally. They don't care. And that's just the way it is. So you have to take the bull by the horns. And if you're interested in learning about gold, please text Ron to the number 989898, and you'll get a text back from Birch Gold Group. They'll send you free information, and you can go from there. There's no obligations for anything. You just take the free information. So again, if you're interested, text Ron to 989898.
Chris, you received a couple calls like this, and I hear people talking about it because they sort of like to challenge me. How can you be optimistic? You're talking about all this terrible things going on. And they have asked, is Ron Paul still an optimist? And that's what we're going to talk about today because it's so important, I think, whether a person comes across as being optimistic or pessimistic. And that to me makes a big difference in the way people approach things. Because it is difficult in life. Most of the time, you can look at things in a positive way or a negative way. Technology can be wonderful and a very positive thing. It can be negative, and criminals can use it, and then it's very negative. So it's so often it's the way people use it. But I think it's very important to realize that overall an attitude makes a difference. But one of the main reasons that I have been interested in this is because there are so many problems, and it does make me think about it. Now, how can I say that the market's going to crash and the inflation is going to come back, and there's a currency crisis coming? There's going to be more war, and the government's intruding into our liberties constantly. So all that is very, very negative, and you can't say, well, just ignore it. It's nothing important, which is I don't think the correct thing. I think it's very serious. We should do something about it. But I think that dwelling on it can be a harm and not an answer to the problem. I think that in trying to analyze my thoughts on this is I think in a way I do it as a self-serving measure because I feel like when you worry too much and you don't have control over the events, you may be able to, contribute. You may be able to talk about it. You may encourage people, but you might not have, I don't like that war going on. Where is it? About 10 countries right now. And I don't like it. I want it to stop. I want to do whatever I can. But if I'm overly concerned about this, it's a weight that I would carry. So I think being optimistic is something I seek, but quite frankly, there are times when, sometimes after an election or sometimes after someone starts a useless war, and sometimes when they talk about the deficit, it's really pessimism staring you in the face, and handling that, I think, is a really important thing to do. But right now, we have a lot of things that we should be concerned with and deal with them. And that is, I've talked many times about a currency crisis. I think there's going to be a currency crisis. We're in the midst of one already starting, and it can get much worse. And how many times, and other people, not just us, talking about the horrendous problem we have with debt. How do you handle this debt? Why do we have this debt? And, you could be, if you carry that burden on your shoulders, it's not much fun. And one of the things I recall spontaneously, I would say at the end of a speech when I was talking to a lot of young people in the campaign, I would say, this is all really, really, really depressing, and what this is. I said, but the one thing is, you should look for the positive answers, and I think that makes a big difference, because there are answers, and an explanation holds some at least hopeful one. I keep thinking, I use a lot of analogies with medicine, that sometimes when people have a problem, they think, oh my goodness, I'm not going to the doctor, I think I have a cancer and all this. And then they finally go to the doctor to find out, and lo and behold, they have cancer. And then it turns out that there was hope given to them, and they said there is treatment, and this one can be cured, and all of a sudden it could be shifting around. So the worrying is one thing. So we can worry about the national debt. We could talk through it, and I'm going to continue to, because I'm concerned about it. But I also think that I like to be as optimistic as I can for a selfish reason, because it makes me feel better. And if you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders and falsely believing if I just do this, it's all going to go away, that's an illusion. But I do think that seeking knowledge and seeking truth and actually associating with other people that want to do the same thing. We have a lot of friends listening to this program that we work with, but there are a lot of programs out there that do the same thing. So I think my advice has always been, when we talk about this, we ought to always try to have fun without denying the truth of the matter is we face serious problems. So we have to deal with both the pessimism and the optimism that is available to us.
Very good, Dr. Paul. Yes, I'm actually optimistic because under the surface, I think there is good in America. The Trump election, what Americans wanted and what they voted for was very promising. Now, you may say, but Trump is doing the exact opposite. He's nothing like it. This is true. I'm just talking about the American people and what they want. Also with the recent election with Thomas Massie. And you may say to yourself, he lost. What are you talking about? That's true too. But underneath the surface, you see that he dominated the age group of 45 and under. That's the age group of 45 and under that has broken away from the controlled media, the TV. They've broken away. We don't watch that anymore. And that is a very positive. and what Thomas Massey stands for. You know, the Uni Party or the Deep State or whatever name you want to call it, they need people to be separated and divided and fighting amongst each other. The two fake parties are a perfect example of just people bickering back and forth, getting nowhere. I mean, if you think that your liberal neighbor is your enemy and the problem, you're doing it wrong. You're missing the big picture. And the same for your liberal neighbor. You know, if he's bickering at you, because that's not the problem. It's the two parties together, and that's where Massey has separated himself. And there's a problem with both of them. And also, the Uni Party does not want any unity with the people on left and right. And you can see what's happening now with Israel. Left and right are uniting, again, on this 45 and under, that this influence from this foreign nation is a problem, and that is a big problem for Israel. So that's what I am optimistic about, is that the 45 and under group is seeing through, what has been lowered over our eyes. And Thomas Massey is one of the people that represents going above the parties, going above the Uni Party. And I'm optimistic of what can happen in the future. It's totally unknown, but under the surface, I think there's plenty to be optimistic about.
It's interesting that you pick Thomas to use as an example, because I've always seen him as having a technique and a quality in giving his speeches. They're really always upbeat. Even his speech after somebody closed him out on the election. I'm not going to say won or lose, but he was upbeat. And that's the kind of person he is. And I think people can learn from this, because if they turn into, very bitter, even though the system may deserve it, even so some other people was, I still emphasize, I don't do it because it doesn't make me feel good. If I did that, being negative is a weight. And so therefore, I look at it as a self-serving reason. And people say, oh, you're just self-serving. No, it's just handling emotions in a different manner. Because if you just keep saying that it's somebody else's fault and you become bitter, people know about this. The only benefit sometimes that bitterness that comes out is more people get, even this I want to see a positive. More people say, government is terrible. Government lies to us. They're cheating, and they've created this. They create these wars, and this motivates people maybe then to open up their minds and look toward some of us who are promoting the cause of liberty and saying, that makes sense. Good economic policies is there's a reason that this has happened. It's an educational problem. It's the fact that the government, I talk about government schools. I don't talk about public schools per se. Government schools have dictated to us more than 100 years the principles that we're suffering from right now. And that doesn't mean we should be, we can't do anything about how we're going to change it. But here and now, things will change. And if you don't change the ideas, if you don't accept the fact that nobody's going to have a magic cure and achieve perfection immediately, then you're going to just get frustrated again. So, and the other suggestion I've always made is people, when we get together in conferences and things, and like-minded people talk about this and look for solutions, the run instructions very firm is you ought to have a little fun doing it. As depressing as it is, that you don't have to give this idea that you have to ignore it. You can't be dealing with that, but use it as an incentive to look for the answers. For instance, right now, we have an economy, I think, is really fragile, and you've heard me say it so often that the biggest deal there is the monetary system, how fraudulent money is the cause of it, and spending money and the debt is such a burden. And then also, even though right now people haven't become more negative about tariffs, but tariffs basically is a tax on the people, and we don't need more taxes, and it enters into the problem that people don't have enough money to go and buy groceries, and because of the inflation that has caused that. So, and the same way with the wars that are going on, we need to stop them, and yet they've been going on and on forever. But there's a lot of people, and I think Chris just mentioned that the young people are very receptive. Those who might be drafted. Matter of fact, Vietnam War ended when the young people demonstrated against it because the older generations, they were just gathering up the kids and force them, and thousands of them were killed. To do their bidding. So it's this whole idea. So right now it's a mixed bag on support or resisting the idea of war, because they're moving closer. Like the registration is going to be made easier. The conditions around the world are becoming more difficult. But I think that is something to recognize. But there's no reason why we can't warn people. And it sounds to me like, in spite of the fact that it's very easy to find a group of young people, probably this weekend, it wouldn't have been hard to find on the streets some young people causing a lot of trouble. But the young people who may be drafted, or all Americans are drafted when these wars are fought and when these debts are run up, because although there's a group in this country that we're very wealthy, they don't care what the cost of a loaf of bread is and gasoline. But there's a large number, it's once the people, and they have begun to see this. If you look at Ukraine, has been a lot of people converted when they started finding out how much money we were spending over there. We don't even know why we were there. And yet when you look into it, you find out that we started the whole dumb thing by a coup in 2014. But that's the ignorance that's poured onto us by the people who are the people who are presenting the news to us and what they've learned at their university. So I think I find it fascinating and interesting to deal with this and understand how people react. But I also think that the goal is how do we move in a direction? How do we combat the people who think that there's nothing wrong with lying and actually believe, the nihilists believe there is no such thing as knowing the truth. And yet I imagine about 90% of the people believe there's truth out there and that it's a good idea to work toward the truth. So there's a lot of good stuff out there and a lot of understanding, and I think it's a challenge, but we also think that a lot of people can enjoy working together to try to change this, to stop the next war, to help build a sound currency and design it over the fact that what we want to do is promote a cause of personal liberty. Chris?
Fantastic, Dr. Paul. Yeah, I'm optimistic also from technology standpoint, because technology can be used to educate yourself and communicate with others. And that ability today is incredible. Just in my lifetime, I'm sure Dr. Paul's lifetime too, we had to use snail mail and wait forever for everything. And communication was not as easy as it is today. Now, obviously, as with everything else, technology can be used to enslave us. The people that want to use it to enslave us they're not bashful about it. But that's how it always is. You give them a pencil and they will look at that pencil and they say, how could I use this to enslave people? That's just their attitude. So no matter what the tool is, whether it be nuclear energy could be used for good and obviously for evil. Airplanes can drop bombs on people, but it could also be a way that you can crisscross the country like never before. So it's not the tool that has any inherent good or evil to it. It's the people that use it. And there are going to be people that use technology to try to enslave us. But we can also look at the same technology and think to yourself, how can I use this for good? How can I use this for liberty? And people are doing that. So even AI can use it for good. They, of course, want to use it to enslave us, yes. But that doesn't mean they're going to succeed. If there's enough people that use it for good, you keep them at bay. Let them go find something else to do. So it's a question of which ideas will dominate. And we're obviously on the side of liberty. There's obviously a lot of people on the side of tyranny, even though they won't use that word. But the tools are the tools. and it all comes down to how they're used. And I think we can remain optimistic that the tools are going to be used for good.
Very good. For years I have made a point that the monetary system is not a good system that we have. It's fiat money. As far as I'm concerned, that's fraud and counterfeit. And that's been around and it's caused a lot of trouble. It allows the inflation. It allows for the business cycle to occur. It allows for the competitions between groups of people and wealth redistribution and distribution becomes artificial and is not helpful to us. But there's been a lot of positive things help in my lifetime that has caused a lot more people to think about gold. Just the fact that gold was re-legalized in 1974 is amazing. There was, you could own gold from 1934 or 33 all the way up to 1975 or 74, and that's a big deal. Just think of all 42 years we weren't even allowed to own gold, and we are now. So that allows people to try to anticipate: are they going to keep running up debt and printing the money? Yes, they are. So it's something that can be done, but it is a freedom that was very important economically speaking. And we had a gold commission, and something that came out of the gold commission back in 1982 was the fact that gold coins and and silver coins were reminted again. They're American coins, and technically they're legal tender. Not a perfect system that we'll be looking for, but at least it's there, and it's a lot better than the paper currency. And I saw today that when currencies go bad, they just add zeros on there, and then and until you need bushel baskets worth of paper money to spend. But today it was announced that we're going to have a Trump $250 bill. I know that's just a small amount, but it's also the principle that a lot of people are going to use $250 because, heck, we had to get rid of the penny because we couldn't afford a copper penny. A copper penny was costing us more than a penny. So it's on and on and on. So, but the more people own gold now. When they took in the gold during the Depression, hardly anybody owed gold, and they had not thought this through. Now they do. And I think that gold is looked at like people look at their guns. And guns are dangerous and are horrible, and people have to be cautious. But we don't want to give them up because that was the ultimate protection as far as the founders were concerned. And that's why there's a Second Amendment. And so I think that the people having gold or they don't have it are going to hang on to it. They're not. If you hear the announcement tomorrow that the Fed, the government just decided, well, send in the gold because we want to control the spending of gold and spending in gold. People aren't going to come rushing forth and marching to the bank in lines to hand in their gold. That'd be like saying, all right, we have, not only have we had a controversial mayor of New York City, they now have all of New York, and they're going to say, all right, on Tuesday next week, bring in your guns. We're taking your guns from you because you don't deserve to have the guns. It's only the government that has allowed to have the guns. So people aren't going to do this. So I think it's a healthy attitude that there's a limit to how much sacrificing of liberty that we'll put up with. And I think that we're getting near that point where a lot more people are saying, enough is enough. And I think it's great when you see, and people get annoyed when I say this, that people say, you know what, I don't trust the government. And the numbers keep going up. The government lies to us. They steal from us. They kill when they shouldn't be killing. They hire people off and they start wars when they're illegal. And people are waking up on this, and I think that is great. It's a bad situation. It should make everybody pessimistic in the sense that we shouldn't have it, but what we have to do is change people's minds. And that also means that changing the minds that are the indoctrination that they find, that they get from government school. And anytime they send $1 to a school, no matter where, indirectly they end up running the school system, and that is not worthwhile to give up our liberties for that.
Right, Dr. Paul, very good. I will finish up with my closing thought. Yes, we did a show on optimism. We tried to change it up. Optimism is the right attitude to have. It's as simple as that. One of my great teachers, I never met him, but through his books and all his works on economics was Murray Rothbard, the great economist. And he was known for being jolly. He laughed, he cackled, he was so happy. And, he tore apart the state, intellectually. And he was known for, just enjoying this battle that we can't avoid. We're in this battle. That's how it is. And Dr. Paul is the same way. We joke off camera before we come on a lot. We joke about how dumb the government is, their policies, and we just joke about other stuff. So it's good to have that attitude. On the show, we obviously point out where the state they exceed their bounds, and they do it a lot because it has to be done. Somebody has to talk about it. We're not the only ones, obviously, but that's our role, is to point that out. But even in that situation, we have to remain optimistic because it's the right thing to do. We tend to attract what we focus on. That's part of our nature. If we focus on doom, we will tend to get it. You're likely to get it because that's what your mind is fixated on. But the opposite is to remain optimistic even in the face of doom. So as bad as it is, and it may get worse, we have to, because it's the right thing to do, remain optimistic.
Very good. I think that the optimism is important for emotional reasons, health reasons, and whatnot, or just recognizing where the problems are so you can deal with them. But they have to be dealt with philosophically. They can't say, well, there's too much inflation. What we have to do with this is give the people more money. We're dealing with it because the rich people have too much money. That sort of thing. They have to be exposed to a different system of economic. And I think that's where we made a lot of progress. I think we made a lot of progress of calling attention to the Federal Reserve. And 30, 40 years ago, nobody talked about it. But I think they're honing in on the real problem, and that is the fraud of the monetary system. Right now they're trying to crack down on all the fraud in the government. They're talking about people who cheat on getting their reimbursements and working on the books, which is true. It's terrible. But compared to the fraud of the monetary system, I mean, that's probably peanuts compared to the destruction of the currency of the dollar, because that involves a lot of people, and that's just getting worse now. But I see it as a contest between the people who work for understanding that perfect truth is unachievable, but a movement and a desire to always seek the truth in all matters is a very noble goal. And I think that is going on. There's more people, a lot more people believe that and would accept that than saying, oh no, I think the nihilists are right. And the nihilists tend to be very, very authoritarian because they say there is no truth. There is no morality that people can sense about, and they put the blame, on the fact that too many people think there's truth. They waste too much time. What they want is you can't know truth. You can't find it. Of course, it's been known from all the beginning of the first printing presses, the first writing down of an understanding of a natural law, and the basic principle of a natural law, which supersedes the government law, is you can't lie, cheat, steal, or kill. Well, if you look at it and be honest with oneself, you find out that the government does a lot of that. Has the government ever lied to us? People would just laugh and say, "Are you kidding? Me asking you a serious question. Did they ever cheat? And did they ever steal money through the inflation? Did they ever break the rules and start a war they shouldn't have? No." People realize this, and I think the fact that nihilism is alive and well, and it's on a purpose. So when you see the authoritarians in the socialist empire, and they say, "Well, you can't know truth, so we will tell you what to do," then they become authoritarian. And anytime you see authoritarians totally violating natural law and saying, well, the government can do this, which you cannot do, then be very suspicious. If you want to promote the cause of liberty, you'll become suspicious enough, and then you will join seeking the cause of liberty, and we invite you to that party of having an abundance of interest and understanding all these issues so that we can become once again a freer nation. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Thanks for watching the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Like and subscribe to help spread the message. And until next time, live free.